Hello and a very warm welcome to yet another engaging session of The Analyst dated 21st September 2024 by Vajiraman Ravi, wherein we'll be covering these 9 set of topics which are featured in The Hindu as well as Indian Express. Coming to the first topic, herein we'll try to understand what are the different forms of violence which are witnessed by the women across their life. What are the reasons for that? What initiatives the government has taken in this backdrop and what more needs to be done? Coming to the second topic, herein we'll try to understand that what is work culture, what are the new emerging trend when it comes to the work culture in India, what are the impacts of that and what more needs to be done in order to improve the working environment when it comes to the Indian society. Coming to the last 7 set of topics, in this we'll try to decode the context in the most simple manner possible. So stay tuned. So let's begin with our first topic. What is the context? Sadly, a news came up wherein a woman was sexually exploited at the police station in the Odisha state. And this topic is related to this aspect of our GS paper 1 syllabus. The first thing that we need to understand with regard to this topic is what is violence against women? So it is basically an act of gender-based violence which is likely to result into physical, sexual, psychological, social, cultural and economic harm to the woman. It is basically a manifestation of unequal power relations between the men and the women. If you look at women in India, from the infancy till they become elderly, they witness violence in one form or the other. Look at this particular picture. Before they are born, they witness female feticide. At the infancy stage, they witness unequal entitlements when it comes to food, when it comes to health, when it comes to education. At the childhood, they witness child abuse, child marriage, child trafficking, etc. When they become adolescent, then they witness forced marriages, sexual harassment, etc. At the reproductive age, they witness violence in form of domestic violence, dowry-related violence, marital rape, etc. And when they reach at the elderly stage, again they witness unequal entitlements when it comes to the economic resources. That is the reason elderly women who are basically widow, they witness a lot of abuse. Having understood the different forms of violence women witness when it comes to the Indian society, let's understand the underlying reasons for the same. First is the prevalence of patriarchal mindset. You must have heard some of the ministers saying that ladke hain chalta hai. This basically refers to the patriarchal mindset which is even prevalent when it comes to the police forces in India. Because when it comes to the police forces, they are primarily male dominated. On account of this, even when the woman witnesses instances of violence, they do not report such instances because of the patriarchal mindset when it comes to the police forces in India. Then there is increased objectification of women when you look at the movies. What this implies is we are relating women to merely as an object. We don't consider that women has their own feelings. Women also have the right to take their own decisions. Then cultural stigma. If you look at the data, majority of the cases wherein the abuse basically belongs to a known person when it comes to the child abuse. It is basically committed by a known person. And since when it comes to the such cases of child abuse, we have the punishment of death penalty. That is why there is underreporting when it comes to instances of child abuse in Indian society. Then, on account of financial dependency, even when women continue to witness dowry-related violences, domestic violences, they do not speak up regarding these instances of violences. Then there is lack of awareness when it comes to women. They are not aware about their rights when it comes to the POSH Act, Prevention of Sexual Exploitation, Harassment at the Workplace, then Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, etc. So, on account of lack of awareness among the women also, such instances of violence are still going on when it comes to the Indian society. Then there is inadequate safety in the public spaces. The Nirbhaya case which occurred in 2012, that took place in a public bus. When it comes to the recent rape case of a doctor, that was done in the public hospital. So this implies what? That even the public spaces are not safe for women. When it comes to the public spaces, they are poorly lit. The women do not find adequate transportation facilities, especially during the odd hours, and we do not have CCTV cameras when it comes to the public spaces. That severely compromise the safety and security of women in India. Let's understand the initiatives which the government of India has taken in order to enhance the safety of women in Indian society. So the government has taken a lot of legal measures. We have Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, we have Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, then we have Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Act, which basically prohibit the objectification of women. Then we have POSH Act, which is Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act. Then we have Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. The government has also taken other measures. It has come up with Nirbhaya Fund. So the money which is there in the Nirbhaya Fund, it would be used to finance such projects which are going to enhance the safety and security of women in India. For example, safe city projects. Then government has come up with She Box, wherein the women employees can file the complaints or instances of sexual exploitation at workplace. Then the government has also come up with Cyber Crime Portal, wherein the women can register the various instances of cyber crime against them, cyberbullying. And the government has also put in place cyber forensic lab in different states to expedite the investigation of such cases of violence. Then the government has also put in place one-stop centers which would be providing integrated support to victims of such violences. For example, medical support, legal support, etc. The government has also universalized the women helpline number to enhance the safety and security of women when it comes to the Indian society. And the government is also developing safe city projects to basically make the public spaces more safe and secure. In this, the government would be putting in place adequate CCTV cameras. It would make sure that the public spaces are well lit. Having understood the initiative which the government of India has undertaken to ensure the safety and security of India, let's just understand what more needs to be done in order to make sure that the Indian society is safe for women. So firstly, we need to increase the representation of women when it comes to the police forces and when it comes to the judiciary. Because remember, one reason that we understood is why women are hesitant when it comes to reporting the instances of violence, because we have greater representation of male when it comes to the police forces as well as judiciary. This prevents women from reporting instances of violence. So in order to put in place gender responsive policing, we need to enhance the representation of women when it comes to the police force as well as the judiciary, so that we can do away with this reporting barrier. And we need to make sure that women are there across the different roles in the police forces to enhance the trust of the public when it comes to the police forces. Then we need to ensure effective training and capacity building of our police forces. We can learn from Telangana Police how they has come up with SHE teams which ensure safety and security of women when it comes to the public places. We also need to do the capacity building of the police force. Why? Because women are currently witnessing new forms of violence because of the technological advancement. That is the cyber crime, cyber bullying, doxing, etc. Non-consensual texting, like that. So in order to make sure that our police force is well trained to deal with such evolving natures of crime against women, we need to make sure that our police is well equipped to deal with such instances. Then we need to put in place the crisis center as has been done in the countries like Australia, Canada and America to basically provide requisite support to the victims of such violences. Then we need to put in place adequate fast track courts as has been recommended by the Justice Verma Committee to basically expedite the process when it comes to the cases of violences against women in India. And lastly, we need to do gender sensitization right from the schools, because recently we witnessed an incident in Badlapur area of Maharashtra also, and that occurred in school. So in this regard, the Bombay High Court has highlighted that we need to do gender sensitization right from the schools in order to tackle the patriarchal mindset. Lastly, we'll be ending this particular topic with a quote which is given by Mahatma Gandhi, that the day on which the women in India would be able to walk freely on the roads even during the night time, that day we can say that India has attained independence in its true essence. We have a practice question for you. So do practice this particular question and leave the answer in the comment box. Let's move on to the next topic. When it comes to this topic, what is the context? So sadly, a news came up wherein an employee of Ernst & Young has died allegedly from back-breaking workload and work stress. This topic is related to this aspect of our GS paper 4 syllabus. Now, the first thing that we need to understand with regard to this topic is what is work culture after all. It basically refers to the working environment in a particular organization, which is shaped by ideas, beliefs, principles, and ideologies which are related to that particular organization. Let's understand the new emerging trends in work culture when it comes to the Indian society. First is quiet quitting. Herein, a person A who is employed in company B would be doing only that much work which is needed to remain in that particular organization. What are the examples? Now, person A would be leaving the office exactly at the time when the office hours end. He might demand extra pay for extra work. Then another trend is quiet firing, wherein the organization creates hostile environment for its employees. Okay. So what are the examples for this? The company would not be giving you enhanced responsibility. The manager would not call you for the meetings, important meetings. He might withhold your raises, okay, or your promotions. Then another trend is moonlighting. In order to understand this, let's create a hypothetical example. Now this is a person A. He is employed in company B. He works in the company for 10 to 5. Now after 5, the time which he is having, he is using that time to work for company C in the same field. But the person A has not informed the company B that he is also doing work for company C. Okay. Why the word moonlighting? Because the person usually does this extra work or this side work during the night time or during weekends. This is criticized by the employer companies. Why? Because the companies feel that then this person A would not be giving due attention to the work which is related to company B, because his attention is diverted to work which he is performing for company C also. Then another new trend is 18 hours work or hustle culture. What does we mean by this? It basically implies that the work remains in the mind of the person even when he is having free time or even when the person is enjoying his holidays. Why? Why this culture is on a rise? Because in certain fields, the person has to meet the target at a very fast pace. And this is something which is common in the sales department of different companies. However, WHO has pointed out that if we increase the working hour, then the people might develop heart diseases. Okay. Another new trend is quiet vacationing. This is common among the millennials. Okay. What does it imply? A person A is employed in company B. He has gone to holidays, but he has not informed the company B, and he is showcasing that he is still available for work. Okay. Why this is on a rise? Because the companies are demanding the presence of their employees even during the odd office hours. That is the reason quiet vacationing is on a rise. And most prominent reason of these new emerging trend is the people who are employed in a particular organization, they have this feeling that the managers or the organizations are not empathetic towards their need. So because of the hustle culture, because of the new emerging trends in the work culture, people are not able to manage the work-life balance. And in order to manage the work-life balance only, we are witnessing new trends like quiet quitting, moonlighting, quiet vacationing, etc. Now, having understood the new emerging trends in the work culture in Indian society, let's just understand what are the impacts of a hostile work culture. Firstly, it is going to reduce the labor productivity, because then that person might be engaged in moonlighting, or he would prefer quiet quitting. It is going to decrease the innovation. Why? Because, for example, in quiet firing, the organization might withhold your promotion. Now this is going to reduce the motivation among the person or the employee to do innovation in that particular field. And this is also on account of the demand from the companies to be available even during the odd office hours. Then it damages the company reputation also, as we are witnessing with regard to Ernst & Young currently. Then we need to understand that what needs to be done in order to improve the working culture in India. So when it comes to the managers, they need to avoid impartiality. They need to keep the personal connections side when they are dealing with different employees. They need to recognize and reward the top performers. And when it comes to the persons who are not able to perform, who are not able to meet the target, with regard to them, the manager should mentor them that how they can improve their work, so that in future they could also meet the requisite targets of the organization. Then we should encourage workplace debates so that there is transparency among the manager and the employees, and there is two-way communication, okay, between them. Then the organization should put in place employment-friendly practices. That means the organization should not demand the employees to be present even during the odd working hours. Then the managers should avoid Hitler approach. That is, they should not always dictate to their juniors. They should have a two-way communication with the juniors. They should act as a mentor to them. They should act as a role model for them, okay, wherein they should tell them, they should guide them that how they can improve their work efficiency. And the organization should, on a regular basis, should conduct training program to basically promote the idea of continuous learning, so that if there is any shift on account of technological advancement, the companies and the people could withstand them. Having understood this, let's understand what are the best practices which are prevalent in India with regard to work culture. So first is ISRO's Foundation Day celebration, wherein it recognizes the contribution of different scientists. Then we have Wellness Day, which is organized by National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, wherein it prioritizes the wellness of its employees. In this, yoga, meditation and health screening is carried out, which basically promotes the wellness of its employees. Then NCERT carries out team building workshop. So herein it comes up with problem solving activities, group engaging, team engaging activities, which is going to enhance the collaboration when it comes to the team members. And lastly, in NIT Rourkela, we have professional development seminar series, which basically enable the professors to learn about the new advancement in their particular domain. This basically promote the idea of continuous learning. With this, we have come to end of this particular topic. We have a practice question for you. Do practice this particular question and leave the answer in the comment box. Let's move to the next topic. Now, moving on to the simplified section. The first topic is related to the government policies and its intervention. Now, what has happened? Recently, the Bombay High Court has struck down one of the key provisions of IT Rules 2021, which basically dealt with the fact-checking units. It is going to severely impact the fact-checking units because some of the states like Karnataka and Tamil Nadu has also established the fact-checking units for their respective states. Now, what are these fact-checking units? So firstly, we need to understand its evolution. It was in existence under the PIB, that is the Press Information Bureau, since November 2019. But it was given legal teeth through the IT Amendment Rules 2023. So what this amendment rule did? So it amended the Rule 3, Clause 1, Subclause B, V of IT Rules 2021, which basically dealt with the definition of fake news. And with this amendment, we basically expanded the definition of fake news, which included the government business now. So what is the purpose of the fact-checking units? It has to examine the online content, and if it found that a particular content is fake and it is related to central government and its agencies, then it would be informing the concerned social media intermediary that you have to strike down this particular online content which is fake. And it would be publishing its decision on @PIB fact check. So online intermediary would have to remove the content if they have to retain the safe harbor immunity. What is the safe harbor immunity? This is provided under Section 79 of IT Act. Okay, it implies that if person A is circulating some content on, let's say, social media, website, Facebook. This is false, this is misleading. Then on account of safe harbor immunity, Facebook is safe. No legal action would be carried out against Facebook. But now under this amended IT rule, if the fact-checking units have highlighted that the content which has been posted by this individual A is fake or it is misleading, and if Facebook do not bring down that content, remove that content from its website, then the safe immunity would be withdrawn from Facebook and it would be subjected to legal proceedings. Okay, that's what safe harbor immunity implies. Now, recently, the Information and Broadcasting Minister has highlighted that between November 2020 and June 2023, this fact-checking unit has taken action with regard to 28,380 cases, okay, which dealt with fake news. And it was notified in March 20, but the Supreme Court has stayed till the High Court, Bombay High Court, come up with its verdict, which it has come right now. Now, the aspect that we need to understand is why there was need of these IT amendments. First was to regulate the fake news, because these fake and misleading news could lead to law and order situations like what we witnessed during the March 2023, wherein violence against migrant workers from Bihar in Tamil Nadu, this online campaign was going on that in Tamil Nadu, migrant workers from Bihar are subjected to violence. Okay, but ultimately it was busted by the police that it is a false news. Then, on account of safe harbor immunity, which is provided under Section 79, as I told you, of the IT Act, the social media intermediaries were not cooperating with the officials, okay, when it comes to bringing down such false and misleading content from their websites. Then, as in India, the internet users have increased manifold. According to Statistica, currently we are having 900 million internet users in India. So we have a very big democracy. In this light, we need to make sure that fake news, like in 2017, you must all have heard this, that there was fake news which was circulating that government is going to install microchips when it comes to the new currency notes, which has come up after demonetization. Then again, during COVID-19 pandemic, there was one false news which was circulating that if you take the COVID-19 vaccines, then it is going to cause infertility among the women. And in 2012, what happened on account of false online threat campaign, okay, there was a mass exodus of the northeastern people from the Bangalore. So in this light, we need to regulate such false or fake misleading news. That is why the recent IT amendments were needed. Now, let's just understand the key provisions of the amended IT rules. First and foremost, it stated that the social media intermediaries have to put in place tighter timelines when it comes to removing the unlawful content. When it comes to content which is obscene, if the social media intermediary has received the complaints with that regard, then the Chief Grievance Redressal Officer has to make sure that the content is removed within 24 hours. When it comes to other content, it has to be removed within 15 days from the day it has received the complaint. Then they have to collaborate with the officials and they have to identify the first originator of such messages. Then stricter rules for bigger platform were put in place. So they have to put in place a nodal officer, compliance officer, etc. Voluntary user verification mechanism was put in place. Then it was stated that the social media intermediaries have to move in the direction of self-regulation and they need to classify the content. What content could not be uploaded on their particular platform, like an obscene content which is showcasing the private parts of a particular individual, etc. They have to come up with a code of ethics. Then they have to put in place a 3-tier grievance redressal mechanism. So first level would be self-regulation, second would be the grievance redressal officer, and third would be the grievance appellate committee. And under these amended rules, the digital news media platforms were also subjected to the amended IT rules. And if the social media intermediaries fail to comply with the directives of the official, then what would be happening? They would be losing their safe harbor immunity. Okay, so they would be subjected to legal actions. and they would also be liable to punishment under the IT Act or IPC. Now IPC is no more. Now let's come back to the news. This was the background that you need to understand to effectively understand this particular news. Now, what arguments were given before the Bombay High Court? These were the people who challenged the key provision of the amended IT rules. The argument that they gave is this provision is arbitrary and it is violative of their fundamental rights, like fundamental right of freedom of speech and expression, the freedom to carry out trade and profession, etc. But according to the centre's view, the centre has stated that this is only going to prohibit the fake content and not the other content which is circulating online. And if the decision of the fact-checking unit is biased or it is incorrect, then you have a safeguard. You can challenge its decision before a constitutional court. Now, we need to understand what are the grounds on the basis of which the Bombay High Court had struck down this key provision of amended IT rules. It stated that it is violative of various fundamental rights like Article 14, Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A, and Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause G, which basically deals with the freedom to practice trade and profession. Then the court also highlighted that it is beyond the reasonable restrictions which are provided under Article 19, Clause 2. You need to let me know in the comment box that what are the reasonable restrictions which are imposed under the Article 19. Okay? What reasonable restrictions are there in the Indian Constitution when it comes to freedom of speech and expression. Then coming back to the news again, it has stated that the expression fake news is quite vague. And it is not the responsibility of the state to ensure that the citizens have access to only true content and not the false or fake content. It has a chilling effect, especially on the social media intermediaries, because they can lose their safe harbor immunity, and this is going to impact their freedom to practice trade or profession. And the safeguard which the centre was pointing out, that you can challenge the decision of fact-checking units before a constitutional court, the Bombay High Court has pointed out that it is an inadequate safeguard. Now let's just understand the other side of the debate as well. Now, contrasting view was given by Justice Gokhale. According to Justice Gokhale, alleging bias against the fact-checking units is unfair, merely because the members are appointed by the government. Then the fact-checking units do not directly penalize the social media intermediaries. And Justice Gokhale also pointed out that in order to participate effectively in the democracy, citizens should have access to the accurate information or data. Last thing that we need to understand with regard to this article is what is going to happen next. So, the case would be placed before the division bench of the Bombay High Court, or an appeal could be filed in the Supreme Court. Why? Because similar cases are pending in Delhi as well as the Madras High Court. And other aspects of this amendment or 2021 guideline are pending before the various high courts, which basically deal with the grievance redressal mechanism when it comes to the social media intermediaries, which was put in place under the IT Rules 2021. That's all that we need to know with regard to this topic. Let's move to the next. Now, recently an indigenous heavy water reactor has attained criticality. Now, this topic is related to this aspect of our GS paper 3 syllabus. So, what's the context? So, recently Unit 7 of Rajasthan Atomic Power Project, which is situated at Chittorgarh district of Rajasthan, has attained criticality. What were the previous two atomic power projects which have achieved the criticality? So, they are Unit 3 and Unit 4 of Kakarpur Atomic Power Station, which is situated in Gujarat. It has become the third one to achieve criticality out of the 16 indigenously pressurized heavy water reactor, which are having a capacity of 700 megawatt each. And it has been confirmed by the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited. So, this implies that it is going to start generation by this year. Now, the first thing that we need to understand is what are pressurized heavy water reactors. So, they basically use natural uranium instead of enriched uranium. And they use heavy water, that is deuterium oxide, both as coolant as well as moderator. Now, what is nuclear fission? So, nuclear fission, what happens is a heavy atomic nucleus would be breaking into smaller nuclei, and it would be releasing energy in form of heat, light and radiation. So we basically do this nuclear fission with radioactive isotopes, that is of uranium-235 and plutonium-239. Now let's understand the process of nuclear fission and how do we attain criticality. Now firstly, we increase the level of neutron. Now if this neutron would be absorbed by the target nuclei, that is the radioactive isotope, it would be broken down into smaller nuclei and it would also release additional neutron along with the energy. Now if out of these 2-3 neutron, one neutron is again absorbed by other radioactive isotopes, then it would basically put in place a growing chain. That is what is referred to be as the criticality, when this process goes on continuously. So it basically refers to the controlled nuclear fission. That's when you attain criticality. If it is controlled, then it would be able to generate power, and if it is uncontrolled, it might lead to explosions like what we witnessed with the atomic bombs. And when it is achieved, when one neutron is absorbed out of the 2-3 additional neutrons which are released in the nuclear fission process. If less than one neutron is absorbed, then the reaction would die out. If greater than one neutron is absorbed, then the process would become uncontrollable and it might lead to enormous explosions. Now, the last thing that we need to understand with regard to this topic is what is nuclear energy and what is the status. Now, when it comes to India, it stands at 7th position across the world when it comes to the number of nuclear reactors in India. And according to Indian government, we are planning to increase the nuclear atomic power contribution from 3.2% to 5% by 2031. And when it comes to the nuclear energy, it is the 5th largest source of electricity when it comes to India. And you can see by this very picture that how the contribution of nuclear energy has increased over a period of time. So nuclear energy is important because it would help us in meeting the goal of net zero emission by 2017. With this, let's move to the next topic. India has formally joined the International Big Cat Alliance. This topic pertains to this aspect of our prelim syllabus. So let's understand, decode the context in a much lucid manner. So what is this International Big Cat Alliance? It was launched by Honorable Prime Minister in April 2023, and it basically aims to secure the habitat and the landscape and secure the future of the big 7 cats across the world. What has happened? Recently, India has formally joined it. So it has signed and ratified the framework. What are the other countries who have also ratified this alliance? That are Nicaragua, Eswatini, Somalia. And why India is part of this particular alliance? Because when it comes to India, it is home to 5 out of 7 big cats which are found across the globe. So apart from puma and jaguar, India is home to tiger, lion, leopard, snow leopard and cheetah. Now let's just understand this International Big Cat Alliance in much greater detail, keeping in mind the prelim stage of your examination. So it was launched in 2023 to commemorate 50 years of Project Tiger in India. And what is the objective? To strengthen the global cooperation, collaboration, to ensure the conservation of 7 big cat species and their habitats. It aims to reach out to 97 range countries wherein these 7 big cats are found across the globe. It basically follows a multi-pronged approach. So it believes in knowledge sharing, capacity building, networking, advocacy, finance and resource output. When it comes to the governance of this particular alliance, so it consists of an assembly of members, a standing committee, a secretariat, and its headquarters is in India only. Government has provided the initial support of 150 crore initially for 5 years. That is from 2023-24 to 2027-28. That's all that we need to know with regard to International Big Cat Alliance. Let's just have a look over the conservation status of these 7 big cats. So you can refer to this particular picture or you can take a screenshot of this. With this, let's move on to the next topic. So recently, the Supreme Court has criticized the CBI for making allegations against the West Bengal judiciary because it was asking to transfer certain cases. Let's just decode this particular article in a more lucid manner. So what is the context? CBI has filed a petition in the Supreme Court to transfer the cases of post-poll violence which occurred in after the state assembly election of 2021 in the state of West Bengal. So why it was demanding to transfer the case outside West Bengal? On account of following reasons. It has highlighted that the witness are facing intimidation, then courts are illegally granting bail, and there is a hostile atmosphere when it comes to the West Bengal state. However, the Supreme Court has criticized the CBI, stating that you cannot cast scandalous allegation against the entire West Bengal judiciary. With regard to this particular topic, we need to understand the different articles which relate with transfer of cases. Now, first is Article 139A, subclause 1. So, when it is used, when similar cases which involve substantially same question of law are pending before the Supreme Court or one High Court, or before the Supreme Court and two or more High Courts. So, what is the process? So, what Supreme Court would be doing? It would withdraw the cases from respective High Courts and it would be deciding that particular question, substantial question of law on itself. And once it has decided the common issue, it would be again returning the case to the respective High Courts so that they can decide the individual cases in light of the law which has been laid down by the Supreme Court. And the purpose of this particular article is to facilitate quick disposal of cases which have similar substantial question of law. Now, the another article which this particular article was talking about, this particular article which has come up in the newspaper was referring to, that is Article 139A, subclause 2. So, in this, the Supreme Court can transfer a particular case from one High Court to another High Court. And with regard to this, the petition could be filed by the concerned litigants and the Supreme Court can also take suo motu action when it comes to this particular article. And why the Supreme Court would be doing this? To meet the end of justice. The example wherein this article was used by the Supreme Court is Union of India versus Shiromani Gurudwara Prabandhak Committee 1986 verdict of the Supreme Court. What has happened? So, suit for damage was filed in the state of Punjab against the central government. Why? Because there was loss of Gurudwara property, especially during the Operation Blue Star. So, Union of India filed a petition in the Supreme Court to transfer this particular case to another High Court. And the Supreme Court transferred this particular case to Delhi High Court. Why? Because it was a suit of very sensitive nature and there were extraordinary atmosphere which was prevailing in the Punjab during that particular time. It was a very sensitive matter. With this, let's move to the next topic. Now, recently, the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi has given the directions to the concerned authorities to take requisite measures to curb the air pollution in Delhi. This topic is related to the prelims aspect of our syllabus. Now, let's decode this particular news in a more simpler manner. So, the Delhi LG has given the directions to the concerned authorities that please do not wait for the air quality index levels to fall. Take these particular measures. What measures he pointed out? We can go for installing anti-smog guns where the building is of more than 7 stories. And it also directed that explore the possibility of employing anti-smog guns over the foot-over bridges. Then we can also tweak the office timings. We could go for staggered office timing and we could also explore the option of work from home. Staggered office timing basically means that different employees will be coming to office at different time. Okay. Then in order to address the deteriorating road infrastructure, especially in the industrial areas, the LG has directed the authorities that devise a comprehensive plan so that we can repair the road and we can effectively manage the waste arising because of that. And it has given the direction to all the departments that you have to submit weekly progress report to the LG Secretariat. The Lieutenant Governor of Delhi basically pointed out to the study which was carried out by IIT Kanpur and it highlighted that the road dust has dropped from 26% to 20% between 2018 and 22, whereas the pollution from vehicles have increased from 39% to 47% in the same duration. That is the reason the LG of Delhi gave the direction to the concerned authorities that come up with a comprehensive plan to repair the roads. Now, with regard to this particular topic, we need to understand what are anti-smog guns. So, it is basically a device which enables us to spray atomized water like as you can see in this particular picture also, into the atmosphere. Why? So that we can bring down the suspended particles. So it would be acting like a rain only, wherein with the rain we bring down the suspended particles which are there in the air. So it helps us in reducing the air pollution. So it can be connected to a water tank and it can be mounted on a vehicle which could be taken across the city to spray water, and it would help us in bringing down the air pollution. Next aspect that we need to understand is what is air quality index. So it was launched in 2014 and the aim is to basically tell you that how safe is the air around you which we are breathing. And another objective was to make the people aware, to basically disseminate the information with regard to the air quality to the general public in the most simpler manner, okay, so that it could be understood by the general public. And how do they do that? So they transform the complex air quality data of various pollutants. So these are the pollutants which are there, which are covered under the air quality index, and they transform the complex air quality data of various pollutants into a single number for easy understanding of the general public. So this is how they compute it, and if it is between this range, it means that the air quality is good, okay. So likewise they come up with data in this format so that the general public could also understand that how safe is the air around them that they are breathing. Now when it comes to the measuring criteria, they take 24 hours average data, and the unit is basically micrograms per cubic meter, and each pollutant quantity in the air is adjusted to a common scale that is between 0 to 500. That works for all pollutants, and then they transform this complex air quality data into a form which is understandable to the general public, so that we can understand that what is the level of air quality or what is the level of air pollution when it comes to the air around us. That's all that we need to know with regard to this topic. Let's move to the next one. Now recently there have been allegations that the ghee which is being used for preparing the Tirupati laddus is adulterated. Now this topic is related to this aspect of our GS paper 1 syllabus. Let's understand the news in more lucid manner. Now the National Dairy Development Board Center for Analysis and Learning in Livestock and Food has come up with its report, and it highlights that there is presence of foreign fats when it comes to the ghee which is used to prepare Tirupati laddus. What does this foreign fats imply? That there is presence of fish oil, beef tallow and lard, which is a fat which is drawn from the abdomen of the pigs. It has also highlighted that all the 5 S values fell outside the limits that has been prescribed by the International Organization for Standardization. And what it implies, that there is presence of soybean, cottonseed, olive, coconut, sunflower, palm kernel fat, rapeseed, wheat and maize germ. Now, along with this report, this body has also highlighted that the report could be false. On what reasons? If there is underfeeding of cows, or if there is overfeeding of cows with feed which are rich in vegetable oils, or if the milk was obtained from colostrum. Basically it means the milk which is there after the cow has given birth to the baby. Okay, so this particular body has highlighted that these could also be the reason on account of which we are witnessing that the ghee which is provided, or the ghee which is used for the preparation of Tirupati laddus is adulterated, or it is breaching these 5 S values. Now, with regard to this topic, what we basically need to understand from our examination point of view is the aspects with regard to Sri Venkateshwara temple. So, this is one of the landmark Vaishnavite temples which is dedicated to Lord Vishnu. It is located in hill town of Tirumala and the Chittoor district of Andhra Pradesh. It is also known by other names like Tirumala temple, Tirupati, Tirupati Balaji. It is dedicated to Lord Sri Venkateshwara, who is considered to be as an incarnation of Vishnu, who basically saved the mankind from the troubles of Kali Yuga. It is considered to be one of the richest temple in the world when it comes to the donations which it receives and the wealth that this temple is having. Now, when it comes to the Tirupati laddus, it was given the GI tag in 2009. I want all of you to let me know in the comment section that what was the first product which was given the GI tag in India and in which year. Now, moving back to the news, when it comes to the architecture of this Sri Venkateshwara temple, it is constructed based on the Dravidian architecture. It is constructed during 300 AD, and the Garbhagriha is also known as Anand Nilayam. When it comes to the presiding deity, which is Venkateshwara, he is there in a standing posture and he faces the east in the Garbhagriha. That's all that we need to know with regard to this topic. Let's move to the next one. Now, the last topic in today's analyst deals with the National Pension Scheme Vatsalya. This topic pertains to this aspect of our prelim syllabus. So, what is the context? So, within one day of the launch of NPS Vatsalya, 9,700 people have enrolled in this. What is this particular scheme? It provides an opportunity to the parents and the guardians to save for their children's retirement. And it is basically administered by the Pension Fund Regulatory Development Authority. Now, we need to understand certain pointers with regard to NPS Vatsalya, which is relevant for our prelims examination. So, it was announced in the budget of 2024-25. What is the eligibility criteria? The child needs to be under the 18 years of age. Both the child as well as the parents or guardian must be Indian citizens, and all the parties, that is children, parent and guardian, they must comply with the know your customer requirements. How can you apply for this particular scheme? So, you can basically apply for this scheme from different points of presence, okay, which basically includes your major banks, Indian Post, pension funds, etc. Or you can also file online application on the website, that is eNPS website. The account would be opened in the name of a minor and it would be operated by the parent or the guardian. Minor would be the beneficiary. When it comes to the contribution to this particular scheme, initially the minimum contribution needs to be 1,000, and accordingly then the parents can decide that what amount of contribution they have to do on a regular basis. There is no maximum limit when it comes to the contribution. Now, once the child would be attaining the age of 18 years, then this particular scheme would be converted into a normal NPS account. When it comes to the withdrawal rules, so there is a 3-year lock-in period. For 3 years, you cannot withdraw any money. After 3 years, you can withdraw up to 25% of the money that the parent has put in when it comes to this particular scheme for various purposes like education, medical treatment for certain illness, disability, etc. Now, if the amount that has been invested in this particular scheme is greater than 2.5 lakh, when the child has attained the age of 18 years, so what we can do in that regard? 80% of that amount could be used to purchase the annuity and the remaining 20% can be taken as a lump sum payment. If there is death of the subscriber, then the entire money would be given to the nominee, which is the guardian. If one guardian dies, then a new guardian must be assigned after completing the new know your customer requirements. And if sadly both the parents die, then a new legal guardian can manage the account, and this new legal guardian do not have to make any further contribution until the child attains the age of 18 years. That's it that we have to learn today. Thank you for being a very patient listener. Do attempt the quiz which is available at the end of the video. All the very best for your preparation.